Welcome to Pod Hostage Diplomacy. We work to free hostages and the unjustly detained around the world. Together with their families, we share their stories and let you know how you can help bring them home.
Now, when it comes to using the family for Russia to get what they want, if that's the case, they've picked the wrong family, because I'm not going to carry water for the Russian authorities.
These are some of the most courageous and resilient people among us.
I never thought that my mother, Nahi Tagavi, will ever have a link to negotiations in Vienna about the JCPOA. That's so crazy.
People who have never given up hope.
Trevor told his girlfriend to tell me to be strong. So I'm trying to be strong for Trevor.
You know, if Trevor can cope with what he's dealing with,
exactly,
we can sure cope with the stress.
People who will never stop working to reunite their families.
We'd like to meet with the president. We believe that, he's surrounded by lots of experienced and educated advisors, but I don't believe that any of them have ever had a child taken hostage by a foreign country, especially not a superpower like Russia.
And we'll be right there by their side until their loved one comes back home.
Because if enough people care, then the right people will care enough.
I'm Darren Nair, and I've been campaigning with many of these families for years. When I first started campaigning with these families, I noticed they struggled to get the media attention they needed. So I decided to create this podcast, which is a safe space for the families to speak as long as they need to about their loved ones and what needs to be done to bring them home.
Nobody can prepare you for what our family is going through. Even if someone had told me 1 year before, in 1 year this is going to happen, prepare yourself. That's impossible.
Thank you for listening, and welcome to Pod Hostage Diplomacy. Welcome to Pod Hostage Diplomacy. Jose Pereira from Houston, Texas, is an innocent American permanent resident, a husband, a father, and a grandfather. Jose worked for U.S. oil company Citgo Petroleum, where he was acting president and CEO. In November 2017, shortly before Thanksgiving, Jose was instructed to travel to Venezuela with a few of his American colleagues to attend a business meeting in Caracas. During that meeting in Caracas, Jose and his 5 other American colleagues were arrested on false charges and wrongfully imprisoned in the country. Collectively, they were known as the Citgo Six. On the 8th of March this year, one of the Citgo Six members, Gustavo Cadenas, was released and is now back home in the United States with his family. Jose and the other members of the Citgo Six remained in prison in Venezuela. Earlier this month, on 1st October, almost 5 years since Jose and his colleagues were arrested, the US government secured the release of 7 American citizens wrongfully detained in Venezuela, including Jose himself and the remaining members of the Citgo Six. The following is a statement from US President Joe Biden on their release. Today, after years of being wrongfully detained in Venezuela, we are bringing home Jorge Toledo, Tomeo Vidal, Alirio Zambrano, Jose Luis Zambrano, Jose Pereira, Matthew Heath, and Osman Khan. These individuals will soon be reunited with their families and back in the arms of their loved ones where they belong. I am grateful for the hard work of dedicated public servants across the US government who made this possible and who continue to deliver on my administration's unflinching commitment to keep faith with Americans held hostage and wrongfully detained all around the world. Today, we celebrate that 7 families will be whole once more. To all the families who are still suffering and separated from their loved ones who are wrongfully detained, know that we remain dedicated to securing their release. It is also a priority of my administration to prevent Americans from having to endure the unimaginable pain of being held hostage or wrongfully detained. This summer, I signed an executive order that will impose new costs, including sanctions and visa bans, against the perpetrators of such acts. In addition, the State Department has introduced a new warning indicator, specifically the letter D, that is designed to help Americans understand where and when travel may incur increased risks of wrongful detention, potentially for long periods of time. If travelers make the decision to go despite this D warning, they need to know that they are incurring massive personal risk and that it may not be feasible for the US government to secure their release. That was a statement from US President Joe Biden. All the families of the Citgo Six are strong and resilient, and they campaign tirelessly to reunite their families. We can confirm this ourselves because we interviewed the families of 5 members of the Citgo Six. In August this year, I had the honor of interviewing Jose's son, John Pereira. In this interview, John talks at length about his father's arrest, the conditions of his detention, Jose's medical issues including his heart attack and catching COVID-19, his sham trial, as well as what the US government, journalists, and the public can do to help. If you want to listen to this interview, you can do so on our website at podhostagediplomacy.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Today, we get to do something we've never done before. We get to interview a former hostage who we campaigned for while they were in captivity. Today, we have the honor of interviewing Jose Pereira himself. Jose, it is so good to see you. I'm so happy that you're free and back home in the United States, reunited with your family. I also know that it's only been a few weeks since your release, and you have now started this long road of recovery, and the wounds are still fresh. So I'm grateful that you've taken the time to speak to us today to share your story.
Darren, thank you very, very much for having me, and it's quite of an honor being with you because I know you have been doing this so long, taking care of the families and some ex-persons that were in jail. And for me, it's an honor I can talk with you because now I can talk about my case and try to give a kind of a message to the rest of the families that they have loved ones left behind. So it's an honor.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to help. I mean, it's one of the most rewarding things I've done in my life. So it's an honor to help. Okay, so first of all, can you please walk us through what happened from the moment you found out that you were finally going home after almost 5 years in captivity?
Okay, yes. Before we begin in this, we have to try to keep a little bit of the story behind this because, we in December 2021 received the first time the visit of Ambassador Roger Carstens. Was appointed for the office created for the hostage handling the state espía. So he went to Venezuela in December 2021 and was the first time we saw him face to face. In that moment, we realized that we were very close to be released in any moment. We didn't know when, but we were more with hope that it will happen in any moment. So he had a meeting with us, and we knew he had meetings on one-on-one with some Venezuelan officials. And, that time he didn't come with nobody, but he opened the conversation, let's say. He came back 3 months later in March 2022, and we made him the question if he's going to release somebody. His answer by the moment was no. But the truth of the matter is that night he could go back with Gustavo Cárdenas. For us was the kind of the beginning of what finally happened for the rest of us. It gave us a lot of hope that we were in the process that the rest of the 5 could be released soon in any moment, So he came back on June 2022, let's say 3 months later. And by that time, Matthew Heath was having some kind of illness. He was in the hospital. We were aware about that situation. And we realized that maybe he will kind of have some kind of priority because in that moment he was ill. But unfortunately, Ambassador Carstens, he came back with his hands empty that day. Was kind of a disappointing to our family, to tell you the truth. The family got really disappointed and down. And, it was kind of funny because the rest of our 5, we were kind of with really big hope that will be the case, that we'll be releasing any moment. So we were telling our families, don't go down. Keep doing the hard work because this is going to happen in any moment. And then it came October 1st. We were that day very early in our cell, and one of the guards came to us and asked us to get properly dressed. And we were kind of laughing because every time they said properly dressed, we had to put kind of a yellow outfit, and we call it the Minion outfit. So we look like minions, So we were dressing with our Minion outfit, and we saw the big boss of the SEBIN coming to our jail, and he said, no, take out that outfit. Put your civil outfit because you're going to go home. So when he said that, my first question to him was, what that means going home? Because for us was kind of a surprise. And he said to us, you're gone. You're going to home. You're free. So in that moment, we realized that something was going on. But, you still are kind of skeptical. So we went to the director's office. So we saw some doctors there to make some kind of medical test and some kind of paperwork. And after that, we were loaded in an armored truck. And when the armored truck began to drive, I saw a sign that said that we were going to the Maiquetía airport. The Maiquetía airport is the airport of Caracas. So in that moment, we truly realized that we were going back home. So, but that was a kind of a process because, we went to our airplane that was waiting us there. So there was some guards there. They asked us to, that we're going to be tied with handcuffs, and they were going to tie our legs, and they were asking to put us some masks. And when I said, I can accept the handcuff, I can accept the legs, but I'm not going to use a mask. So I told the guy, I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm sorry. So he respected that. No mask. He told us that we're going to have a 1.5 hour flight. So we were kind of surprised because he said, where are we going to? 1 hour and a half, to the U.S. is 5 hours. So we're going to be in the middle of the Caribbean. We were kind of guessing if we were going to go to Cuba, So at the end, we landed in a very tiny island in the Caribbean. It was kind of funny because it's so tiny that even the airplane to land was kind of sketchy because it was so small, the island. Later on, we realized that it was St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we landed there, no sign. We didn't recognize the flag that was there. So we had to wait. And kind of some minutes after, we saw a big airplane of the U.S. landing, and we said, here is our hero. Ambassador Carter came for us. So he landed there, and we were instructed, and we were getting out all the handcuff and stuff, and we were instructed to go to the other plane, and well, the rest is history. We went back to the U.S. When we were entering to the U.S. airspace, the captain came out, and I remember the movie Argus at the time because when the guy said, hey, we're coming to the U.S. airspace, was kind of funny because everybody was hugging, everybody was laughing, everybody was crying. And after that, we realized that Mr. Biden was calling our families, giving the big surprise with a call. And Ambassador Carson passed us the phone. I could talk with my wife before we were landing. And kind of minutes after we were landing in San Antonio. And well, everybody was waiting us there. It was a most emotional moment in my life. See my family there, see my grandson that I didn't know coming to me was the best moment I will remember ever.
I can only imagine, but I've had the privilege of seeing some of the photos you sent me. I mean, it's just amazing. I can only imagine how amazing that must have been for you and for the families. And again, I'm so happy that you're now back home. You were released with not just your Citgo colleagues, but also with former US Marine Matthew Heath and Osman Khan. Was that the first time you met them face to face, or did you bump into them in prison, or were they held somewhere else?
No, it was kind of funny, the situation, because Matthew, we never met him. But when we saw him coming to the plane, because we were following him, the story of him, his mom was doing an awesome job pushing hard for him. So we kind of thought that we knew this guy. So when I saw Matthew coming, I said, "Hey, you're Matthew." So it was a privilege knowing him the first time. And he was by the way, in the hospital with a guy that was with us when we were in the DSC. So kind of he knew our history and we knew about him. So it was two old buddies that were meeting after a long time. So yeah, we didn't know him. We knew a lot of him and we were so glad to see him in that plane. And the same was with Osman. Osman is a very young guy, a very awesome guy. So I can tell you, we were so pleased that these guys were coming with us.
Yeah, so I think the Matthew Heath's family, they posted a photo of two of them on the plane smiling, and you could see Matthew's face and you saw Osman's face, and they were just very happy. I understand all of you were taken to a Department of Defense medical facility to go through health checks right after you were released. And this was in San Antonio. Can you talk more about this?
Well, basically, first of all, they did an awesome job with us because they treated us so well, taking care of all our medical things. Because one of the things we went through all these 5 years is that really our health treatment was very, very poor. In fact, was kind of lack of medical treatment. In my particular case, I had a lot of issues there from my health point of view. And I kind of survived it because I take care by my own. So I was kind of auto-medicating my own because normally you don't have a doctor treating to you. So it was so overwhelming seeing these guys so taking care of us, not only from the physical point of view, so they were taking care from the psychological point of view. So there was a very handful psychologists that were helping us with the transition. They call it the compression process. It's like the Coca-Cola that if you open it so fast, it explodes. If you open it very quietly, it will go in a transition. So they helped us. And even my wife couldn't attend that in some moment. So I'm really, really glad in what the U.S. government did for us, because it was a kind of a transition coming to a new normal life that was really helpful. I have kind of the first day that I was there, I had to take a shower, and I went to the shower. When I saw the hot hour, and I was so glad to have that. I stayed like a half hour in the shower. And the nurse came to knock me the door because she saw something wrong, what's going on. I said, "Hey, Mr. Pereira, are you okay?" He said, "I'm doing okay." So I wanted to stay an hour there. So, but yeah, it was kind of very, very, very awesome what these guys did to us.
How long was it before you actually got to go home? Because like you said, they call it the compression process, right? So I interviewed Michael White. He's an American citizen and U.S. Navy veteran who was held hostage in Iran for, I believe, around 600 days. And when he came home, he didn't really have a support system. So it was one of the worst moments of his life. But in your case, obviously you're surrounded by family. How long was it before they actually let you go home? Or did you choose to go home early? Did they give you the option of staying longer?
We were free to stay at the time we realized we needed, but all of us decided to stay the time that they decided it would be the right time to us. So we stayed around 10 days because it was really, really helpful. And let me tell you something. One day I was talking with one of the doctors, and he made me some story about that. You know, when the veterans came from World War II, the difference between that process and the veteran that came from Vietnam, for example, was different, because the veteran that came from World War II came by ship, and they went by weeks traveling with their colleagues, their co-workers. And they were talking among them. So they were in a kind of a decompression process, a natural decompression process. The veterans that came in Vietnam, they came alone by plane and went directly to their homes. So when they came back to home, the shock between what they have been going through and the shock of their new life was kind of overwhelming. So, you need that decompression process. So we're really glad they did it to us, because even that you think that you're okay, you begin to realize there are things that you need to handle. So now I am fully aware of some situation, because again, I have 5 years without seeing my wife and my kids. And now and my pets. I have some pets that when I left, they were very, very, have like 2 or 3 months. Now they are 5 years old. So everything is new for me. So I'm kind of relearning that process. Okay.
Absolutely. And you mentioned your grandson earlier. It was the first time you met him.
Correct. When we arrived to San Antonio, I think this is going to be one of the best moments that I will remember ever. I believe he will also have his memories on that, because we never met. I knew him by photos and he knew me by photo. I learned that day that my daughter-in-law was keeping every day showing photos of me, saying, hey, this is Grandpa. See his face. This is Grandpa. So what's kind of funny, because when they were then in the hangar waiting for us, I saw a very tiny guy, running to me and yelling, hey, Grandpa. I realized that was my grandson, Lucas. So he jumped literally to me, and that photo, I have it, and I'm going to put in a big portrait, because it's so awesome, the photo. So, yeah, for me, having met him the first time in that way is going to be something remarkable for the rest of my life.
I mean, I'm so happy for the two of you. How are you doing now, and what have you been up to since your release?
Well, I have been going through several processes. One of, as I said, to recovering, to the new life, what I call the new normal. That, to tell you the truth, I still don't know what is going to be my new normal. Okay, but one of the things that I have been thinking during all the time that I was there in jail, I always thought, what are gonna you do when you get released? So I always thought about that moment. And in some point, the first thing that when I begin to understand that there's a lot of Americans there in a similar situation that us worldwide, for me was surprising. I was not aware of about that situation. I remember that back to, I believe, 2019, our family went to a meeting in the White House with the former vice president, and that day there was a gala of that Foley Foundation that they were invited. And that day were invited a lot of families that had beloved ones kept in, Russia, Iran, China. And, when my wife could tell me about that, because by that point we were kind of smuggling letters between us and we can have some kind of communication. And she talked me about that, and I tried to begin to investigate what was going on. And it's when the first time I realized there are really a lot of people, 50, 60 people that are kept there. And I said, hey, you know what? This is something amazing. So I began to follow more their stories. And then happened that it began to appear some releases worldwide. We saw, for example, in TV when it was released, some lady of Australia. Then we saw I don't want to name that, but there was a lady after that was released in UK, and then happened the release of Trevor in US. So every time I saw the interviews of them or their family, we found that there was a kind of a pattern, because the suffering of the family is always the same. The families, all of them, are always the same pain, is the same suffering. That is kind of is exactly a pattern that the families and the people, of course, are suffering. So I said, you know what? The day I go out, I'm gonna begin to talk among these people, because it's kind of you believe that it's kind of a mission that I need. So that's what I have been doing all these days. I have been doing some kind of interviews, and every time I'm trying to spread the message, because one of the things that I really learned is that you need to have hope. You need to have faith. And because this is really the thing that keeps you alive. When you have the hope and the faith that you're going to come back to your loved ones and you're going to see them soon, and you're going to be in a good mood. So my message to them is that don't lose the faith, don't lose the hope. And I want to spread the message. So I to tell you the truth, I don't know what I'm going to do for my living from now on, but what I'm doing now, I'm feeling kind of glad doing it.
That's great. And I also know you have a Twitter account now, and you've been raising awareness of other hostages held around the world, which is amazing. We and their families are very grateful that you're doing this. So thank you for that. And please do keep on doing that. I also saw your post on Twitter where you said you've been spending time with your grandchildren. Clearly, you're making up for lost time with the family, all the missed birthdays, the anniversaries, and life events. What has that been like?
Well, it's something amazing because, for example, I lost the birthday of my kids. I lost the birthday of my grandson. I lost my 60 years birthday that was in the jail. Before this happened, I always told my wife, we have more than 30 years married, and that when I got to the 60 years, we would do a very big party in a cruise. And well, that didn't happen. I was alone in a jail, and she sent me a cake that day, by the way. And I was in the, what I'm going to do with this cake. So I tried to share with the people that were there, and try to have at least a good moment in my life. But I'm trying to catch up right now. All the time lost, I'm trying to catch up with my grandkids. I'm trying to catch up with my kids. I'm trying to catch up with my wife. And well, this is something that I'm really enjoying now. I'm catching up with my pets also. So I'm really enjoying it. In
the last 5 years, America and the world has changed in so many ways. I've spoken to many former hostages, and they say when they're being held in captivity, it's like you're frozen in time. Time stands still for you, and yet the rest of the world moves on. What are the changes that have stood out for you? As in, what are the changes that you've noticed since you've been home?
Okay, this is something so true. The first time I heard that is when I saw the interview of the lady of Australia. She's Kylie Gilbert Moore. Okay. I saw an interview they gave to her, and she talked about that. And then I heard that from Nazanin, and then I heard that from Trevor. And I said, God, this is the same thing we're feeling, because you feel like you're in a time machine. You're in a vessel in a time machine, and that time stays still. But the world is continuing evolving and moving. So when you go back, because we had during all these 5 years, we had 2 very small house arrests. The first time I had the 2 months house arrest in 2019, was shocking for me, because my mind couldn't realize the 2 years and a half already has passed. And now that I have 5 years, sometimes it's kind of my mind doesn't recognize it. I'm still in that process, and the world has changed so much. Now the world is, there are wars, and there are a lot of the pandemic also put a lot of sensitivity in the skin of the people. So I'm kind of learning that. And by the way, that things like simple like a phone, I'm learning how to use it. I for me, it's very new. You talk about, I was in the Twitter. Yes, I opened my Twitter account, and I'm learning to use it. I'm very new using it. So I'm trying to learning a lot of things for me, it's a lot of things that I had to relearn again.
I mean, that learning never really stops. But you're absolutely right. So it was Dr. Kylie Moore Gilbert. She was a British-Australian academic who was held hostage in Iran for about 802, maybe 3 days. Mm-hmm. The second person was Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, the British charity worker from London. So if you listened to this podcast before, you know who Nazanin is, because I've interviewed Richard Ratcliffe 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
My very first episode was with Richard Ratcliffe, Nazanin's husband. Okay. I campaigned with him for almost 6 years to free his wife, Nazanin. And third person you mentioned, Trevor Reed, the American and former U.S. Marine who was held hostage pretty much in Russia for 3 years, 2.5 years, or 3 years. Joey and Paula Reed, Trevor Reed's parents, were the first American family I interviewed. They were my second episode. And again, I'm so happy that he's free. And he was actually taken to that same facility in San Antonio when he returned as well earlier this year, right? Yeah, and correct. You've been in contact with Trevor?
Yeah, we had some the other day, some chats. Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I admire all these guys that I'm talking about is that they have been continuing campaigning for this. So they inspire you what they're doing, because all of the 3 persons that I mentioned, I'm following them right now. I know they are very heavy campaigning. And I want to do that because I believe that this is the right thing to do, because again, this, as you put in your podcast, the hostage diplomacy is something that people are not aware that is happening. And it's happening in a lot of countries in the world. And this is something that has to stop, because, you know, you can be a UK citizen, you can be an American citizen, you can be an Australian citizen, a Belgian, whatever. And then you're with your family in a family trip. You know, you're touristing somewhere, taking photos, chilling out. And that day, something wrong happened and you finalize in a jail. And then you stay 5 or 6 years because you have that citizenship. So that is not good. That it is happening, and the people are not aware about the situation. For example, I learned that one of the hostages now that we have in the campaign that I'm going to talk later on is this guy of Rwanda, Paul Rusesabagina. I am a movie lover, and I enjoyed the Hotel Rwanda movie with my wife a lot of years ago. I admire the guy, and then knowing that he's kept in jail, for me was a shock the day I learned about it. And now that his family is in the campaign, his daughter. So for me, something means something that everybody's pushing in the same direction to get the people released. So people need to know about this. So I want to raise the awareness of this.
No, thank you very much for doing that. We could use all the help we can get, because as I say in my interviews, hostage diplomacy doesn't happen to everyone, but it can happen to anyone.
Correct.
And that's why it's one of the reasons why I created this podcast, and I interview people from all around the world to show that this is not just an American problem. It's not just a British problem. It's not just an Australian problem or French or German problem. It's a problem that affects many countries around the world. And you're going to need an international coalition to tackle this issue. And how we do that, that's still something very smart people in positions of power need to get together and talk about. And what I'm trying to do is just raise awareness, educate the voters about this issue and how it can affect them, and get them to write to their members of parliament, their senators, their congressmen, and say that this is something people want you to fix. And that's kind of the objective of this podcast. I saw your other post on Twitter where you said you attended your first church service in 5 years. I interviewed the families of 5 of the 606, and many of them said they looked to religion to find solace, to find the strength to cope with this ongoing trauma. Was that what you did? And what other ways did you use to find the strength to carry on?
Well, definitively, the answer is yes. One of the things that we learned during all this process is that you need to come back to God, whatever you believe, because I understand that you can believe in maybe another presence, but you need to go back to God. Because why? Because sometimes you forget about this. And when I always talk about my past life. In my past life, I remember that sometimes I was driving to home or driving to my job. I was always busy. And, I saw that there was a Bible study thing. I said, why the people are doing that? Wasting their time doing that. Well, let me tell you, at the end, we were doing kind of Bible studies every day during staying in the jail, because we have an episode that happened to us that I am always talking about it because I believe it was a magical episode. Okay, when we were there in the jail of the DGC, is a military installation. We were in a basement that is like a 2 or 3, 4 floors in the basement, and by that time we didn't have access to no books, there was no TV, no radio, no nothing, and we were kind of all the day doing nothing, only thinking and thinking and thinking. And one day, one guy could smuggle a small pocket Bible, and he told us, "Hey, I have a pocket Bible." So we began to read that small, very, very small Bible with candles. And then after that, we begin to read it. We begin to have some kind of a relief reading the Bible, but we did it in a very quiet way because we had the cameras that could see you there. And one day, one of the guards came in and saw us reading. And we got, this guy is going to punish us. And then, but the guy, we learned that his family was religious. So the guy came to us and said, no, continue doing. You're doing good. And the other day, he brought us a praying Bible, a big Bible. He said, take the Bible. Take the real Bible. And we began to read the Bible, and that process continue. And the people begin to go more to us. But by that time, we were around 150 people there. And from those 150 people, almost a third began to read the Bible with us. So now we were like 50 people reading the Bible. And it became like a church. And that was kind of a magical momentum, because really you felt the presence of God. That thing made us, all of us, begin to read the Bible every night. We begin to study the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and was a daily thing we were doing, and they gave us a lot of relief. I can tell you that every night we did that, and we slept in peace. So when we were released, and I came back from San Antonio, the first thing I did that weekend was go to the church. And I went to a church that my daughter-in-law was assistant, and it was a magical moment also, because this is a very big church, almost 1,000 people, very big, very big. And, I saw that playing music. It was so amusing, the moment. And the priest, he was aware about our situation, because my daughter-in-law had told him. And that guy came and he hugged us, and and I felt like I was like the Holy Spirit was coming to me. It was so relieved, and I said, this is something that you had to be aware. And I think that everybody that's going through a situation like this, or anything that it's not that you have to go to God because you're having a bad moment. It's because you always have to go to God. So I believe that this is something that we learned there, and we will continue doing it, because it's something that gave us a lot of relief.
I'm glad. And you're not the first former hostage to say so. In my last episode, I interviewed American humanitarian Aya Hijazi, who was wrongfully imprisoned in Egypt for 3 years. She said one of the things that got her through her captivity was religion and spirituality. So it's something I see quite often with former hostages. Even Nazanin, when she was held in prison in Iran, she looked to religion as well to find hope. So yeah, it's quite common, and I'm glad you're going to continue it.
No, because I want to point out that even the religion, we in some point we had opportunity we were allowed to bring books, and most of the people that were kept in that facility, unfortunately, are political prisoners, and we knew a kind of clever guys, high-ranked political prisoners. And they when they were allowed to bring books, we wrote a lot of very interesting books that maybe most of them, to tell you the truth, maybe I will never read them in my life if I were not being there to have the time to read them. So one of the books that kind of marked me was a book that is called Man in Searching of a Meaning. There is a guy that he was Jew, Viktor Frankl. I was not aware about that book. Okay, it was the first time I saw about it. Maybe you have it there, no? Okay, you're looking at it. Well, let me tell you, for me, okay, this is the book, Man Searching for a Meaning. I can tell you, everybody in his life has to read that book. But, reading it in the jail has something more amazing, because you can understand why that guy could survive, and that is the answer why you can survive if you look for a meaning of your life. And when we realized that the meaning to survive was our family, that we needed to be good in soul and body and spirit for our family, that made a lot. It was a boost in our life. So that book, everybody has to read it. So I am glad that I could read that book in jail, because for me meant something.
The reason I bought this arrived like 3 days ago, and I bought this because you mentioned this.
You bought it? Oh,
no, I'm serious. I bought this because you've been tweeting quotes about this.
Okay, correct.
On your Twitter feed, and you mentioned it in interviews. So I decided, okay, I'm going to buy this, and I haven't read it yet. I have read parts of it, and I've definitely seen like the quotes you've been tweeting. So yeah, it's a very good book.
That book, let me tell you.
Thank you for that.
A little heads up on the book. This guy, Viktor Frankl, he was from Austria, okay, and he was the head of a psychiatry hospital. He was psychiatry, okay, and he was developing a theory that is now called the logotherapy, okay. The logotherapy is the therapy when you have a logos. Logo in Latin is meaning. So, but he couldn't finish because he was sent to the concentration camp with the family. But he realized there that the people that survived was because they had a meaning in their life. Because they were always thinking, I have to go back to my family, I have to go back to my life, to my wife, to whatever. The people that lost the meaning, they died. They frozen. They appeared in the night dead. They passed away. So that guy, after he went from jail, he concluded his study, and now is the famous logotherapy theory. So it's amazing. The book is amazing. I can tell. It's amazing. Everybody should read it.
Yeah. So for our listeners, the book's title is Man's Search for Meaning, the classic tribute to hope from the Holocaust. The author is Viktor E. Frankl. Mm-hmm. So please do buy this book. They don't sponsor us, but go for it. All right. So no, genuinely, it's a great book. Yeah. And like I said, I interviewed Aya Hijazi last week, and she mentioned that she was reading Maya Angelou, and it gave her the similar kind of inspiration. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Jose, I interviewed your son, John, in August. We discussed at length your arrest, the conditions of your detention, your medical issues, including your heart attack and catching COVID, your sham trial, as well as what the US government, journalists, and the public can do to help. I know the wounds are still fresh, but would you like to walk us through what happened from your perspective?
In our case, well, unfortunately, in our case, we were kept in the middle of a political situation that we didn't have absolutely nothing to do, because when we get caught, the situation between Venezuela and the U.S. was kind of bad. It was a lot of sanctions that were going in place. And when they realized that the team were Americans, so they said, hey, now we have this guy here. So they begin from day one to see what they can do with us. But when the things become to get worse, because in 2018, the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela was expelled. So the relation was totally broken. There was no communication, and the sanctions continue going. They become to be personal sanctions to U.S. Venezuelan companies, banks, ministry, whatever. And the thing, and then in 2019 erupted opposition leader that so it was a kind of a big dispute between Venezuela and U.S. and we were caught in the middle. We were in a kind of the perfect storm, and we were like a puppet or a pet in a cage, and we were like caught in the middle of everything. Every time the thing went worse, it went worse to us. And when the U.S. decided to go and talk directly to these guys because of us, and I will have always the gratitude to Ambassador Carsten and his wonderful team on Espeja, because this is something that is not of politics. Because one of the things that always happens is you get caught in the middle of politics, in something that you don't have absolutely nothing to do, because we are not politics. We don't have absolutely nothing to do with that. So you say, but why I'm suffering this? Why I'm going through this? Why I have to do with this? But that is the situation. So my recommendation for the future, for any government, is that put beside the politics when there is a hostage case. It's kind of have the moral courage, take the right decisions to bring the people back, but don't try to play politics with them, because I have heard that in other cases that has been the case. They have been caught in the middle of political issues.
So, Jose, you touched on a very important point when you mentioned governments should not play politics and innocent people should not be caught in the middle of this. Now, the US government passed the Robert Levinson Hostage Recovery and Hostage Taking Accountability Act a few years ago. It's named after Robert Levinson, who is an American citizen who was held hostage in Iran and has now been presumed dead. I believe he was taken over a decade ago. And sadly, he's been presumed dead. So in the wake of this, campaigners, including his family, the James Foley Legacy Foundation, have lobbied Congress to create a law that helps bring home Americans wrongfully detained and held hostage overseas. It gives the government power. It prioritizes this issue. And as per my understanding, this applies to both American citizens and lawful permanent residents.
Correct.
However, it appears that it is much harder to be classified as wrongfully detained if you're a US permanent resident as opposed to a citizen. An example here would be US lawful permanent resident Shahab Dalili from Virginia, who has been held hostage in Iran since April 2016. He is not the only American currently held hostage in Iran, American citizens Siamak Namazi, Murad Tabaz, and Ahmad Shaghi are also being held hostage in Iran. However, Siamak, Murad, and Ahmad have been classified as wrongfully detained by the US government, but Shahab has not, even though the circumstances of his arrest were similar to the others. What are your thoughts on this, given that you yourself are a lawful permanent resident in the United States and not yet an American citizen?
Okay, that's a very, very good question, Darren, because first of all, when the Levinson Act was approved, that it was a very good start. Let's put it from there. It was a very good start because now you have like a kind of a procedure how to handle when the hostage case come and how to handle people to be classified as wrongfully detained. This is like kind of an overall first step, but more has to be done. For example, recently, as you mentioned, the executive order was issued. I believe that was part of the pressure that had been going through the government for that. But there is still more to have been doing, because you mentioned, for example, the case of this permanent resident, Dalili is his name?
Yes, it's Shahab Dalili.
Dalili, okay. Well, to tell you
Shahab
the truth,
Dalili, he's from Virginia.
Yeah, I don't know what is his case. In a particular case, as you said, we were 6, 5 were citizens. I was a permanent resident in the process to become citizen. But, our case was so clear that it was a sham trial that when we decided to proceed with the government to submit all the paperwork for be classified as wrongfully detained, the case clearly was considered like that. But said that process sometimes takes too long, because when the person get caught as a hostage from diplomacy, sometimes it takes too long. Sometimes it can take years, and that should be expedited, because the person doesn't have the fault that get caught in the middle of some political thing. So the first thing that the government should do is protect that person. And this is something that should happen worldwide, because the US doing it right, is doing it properly. But I believe the other countries like UK, like Australia, Belgium, French, whatever, should do the same. So you mentioned it earlier that this should be something more worldwide. I believe this should be something at the level of the UN. There should be kind of a Levinson Act at the level of the UN, because the Levinson Act created the state's SPIHA office that, as I said, and I can say that clearly here, that is amazing team. Ambassador Carter and all his team are amazing. With a very big A. Amazing. By the way, I call Ambassador Carter Captain America, because he's Roger, he's Captain America for me. So he's doing so great that we need more Roger Carter worldwide. Should be more Carter in the UK. It should be more. So it should be even at the level of the UN. So this is what is happening. And I think one of the things that for me, raising the message, making the pressure, things like the Bring Our Family Home campaign are doing, are making this more visible. But there is more things to be done. For example, the things like the Richardson Foundation or the Foley Foundation or the Amer Fakouri Foundation. They're Hostages USA, Hostages Worldwide. There are several foundations that are doing so amazing job, but the people are not aware. I can tell you, Darren, after this happened, I was contacted by Hostages US, the NGO that is taking care of post-traumatic events, and they are doing so awesome. I'm overwhelmed at the help I'm receiving from them. They are calling me 2-3 times in a day how I'm taking care of my thing, because one of the things that nobody realizes, once you come back, you have a lot of issues that you have left behind, because you said that the world continues. So then you have financial issues, tax issues, billing, whatever. So it's like a shocking moment that you receive in this moment, because you realize that the life continues and you have to catch up with the life. So this is part of the help this organization are doing. And I'm kind of so overwhelmed on what they are doing, because these are people that like you are advocating for the people that have been kept hostage, and this should be more visible. The people are not aware about this situation, that they are not aware about all the good job that all these organizations are doing. And well, in the way that I can spread that message, I'm going to do it. I really am going to do it.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to the fact that hostage diplomacy doesn't happen to everyone, but it can happen to anyone.
Right.
If this was something, if hostage diplomacy and hostage taking was a lot more common, many more people would be aware of this. But the thing is, most members of the public think, well, this is something that's not going to happen to me, or very unlikely to happen to me, or I'm not going to travel to these dangerous countries, or these countries that have adversarial relationships with my home country, so I'll be safe. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean it won't happen to them.
Correct.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. They deserve a lot more publicity. Hostage US has done phenomenal work, not just for returning hostages, but for the families of current hostages. So I think when I interviewed Alexandra Zambrano Forsyth, Alirio Zambrano's daughter and Jose Luis's niece, she said that Hostage US helped her sister with a mortgage for a house or something. But they do help families of hostages while they're in captivity as well.
No. I wanted to emphasize that is totally true, and I'm a proof of that, because they are taking of me so hard. They are pushing me so hard that I feel kind of overwhelmed how they are doing it. In the case that I receive calls 2 or 3 times in the day. Hey, how are you doing, Jose? Are you taking care of this? So they're on top of everything. They're doing so good job that again, I was not aware that these NGOs and this institution were doing so awesome job. Institution like the Foley Foundation. Can you imagine when I talked to the people and said that Mrs. Diane Foley, that is a wonderful lady, did what she did after what happened with his son, is something amazing. Things like what Bill Richardson and Mickey Birmingham are doing, advocating, because they believe in that. Period. They believe, and they do it because they feel it, they mean it. The Fukuro Foundation, you are doing it. So the people that are doing this thing are doing it because they believe. They believe they're doing things that can change the world. And so it's amazing. I'm kind of happy in some way, that because you are part of the family that maybe you didn't want to be. But now that the life and God put you in that position, now you're happy that you know these guys. So I have met people that maybe in other situations I will have never met. And now I know that there are so awesome people because of the situation I went through. So, that is part of the meaning of the life.
I had the honor of interviewing Diane Foley earlier this year. You're absolutely right. What she's done is incredible, given the murder of her son, eldest child, James Foley. They do. The James W. Foley Legacy Foundation do incredible work. Another thing that one of the family members of a current hostage has mentioned is the US government's approach of bringing some people home, but not everyone home. Like earlier this year, before they brought you home, they brought your colleague Gustavo Cardenas home. They didn't bring all the Citgo 6 members home. They brought Trevor Reed home from Russia, but they didn't bring Paul Whelan and Brittany Griner home. And this kind of approach where they're bringing some American citizens held hostage overseas back home, but not all of them, in itself causes problems. So I believe it was Elizabeth Whelan that posted a tweet on Twitter about this, saying this is what happens when the government doesn't bring everyone home at the same time. What do you think the government should do? And for people who aren't aware what it was like being left behind, can you talk about the moment you found out that Gustavo Cardenas, your colleague, was being released? Now, don't get me wrong. I understand every single one of you were so happy for him, right? There was no doubt in anyone's mind he deserved to be released. But what was it like for you, for the rest of you, watching him go home, while at the same time knowing that you were left behind?
There are two mixed feelings, because one is the joy of the moment that your colleague is being released, and of course the other is that you feel, if it's going to happen to me, or I'm going to be left behind. Okay. In the particular case when Gustavo was released, I had the honor to be there, because when we were in that moment only with him, Tomeo and me. We were looking, by the way, a soccer match. We were big fans of soccer. We were I don't remember which match it was, Real Madrid, whatever. So Gustavo was called to a meeting in the direction, and a few minutes after, he came kind of in shock. And when he told us, I'm going to go. So for us, was like a wow. But was a good wow, because we knew about he was so needed to go because his son. So for us was, Gustavo, go. And let me tell you, nobody complained about that. None of us, none of our families, everybody was really happy. But of course, at the same time, our family was kind of, when it's going to happen to our dads. In my particular case, I can tell you, I never lose the hope. Never, absolutely never. I always told my wife, you know what? Because she went totally down, thinking that I could be left behind. And when we saw the case, for example, of Miss Whelan, about his brother, and the pain that happened, that they brought Trevor, that Trevor itself was kind of feeling pity on the situation. Gustavo, the same. I know that he told our family that he feel kind of guilty. He didn't have no reason to be guilty, because it could have been me, it could have been another of the guy. But the truth of the matter is that we never lose hope. I always told my wife that be confident that we're gonna come together, and it happened. And let me tell you, the moment I was flying, my thought was for the other guys that were left behind there, because remember, there are other Americans that are still left behind. And two of them, there is Luke and Aaron, they were in the cell beside us. They were our neighbors. We saw them in the patio almost every day, and we always talk with them, talk about books, music, whatever. And their family, talk about their friends, their girlfriends, their wife, their kids, their moms. So when I was flying, I was thinking in them. So one of the things that, of course, that has to be done better, I know that Ambassador Carsten is doing the best he can do, but, it's kind of difficult. The people, if there is the opportunity to bring the people, they have to bring everybody. So if you have the chance, you have to take it. In the case of Gustavo, I remember that when it happened, my son told me, he said, that Gustavo became the pizza. And I said, what is the pizza? He said, Dad, when you see the movies that somebody takes in the bank hostages, some days after, this guy is hungry, and he goes to the police and said, I'm hungry, bring me a pizza. And then the police say, I will give you a pizza, but give me one hostage. So that's what happened with Gustavo. They were hungry, and they gave him a pizza. So we knew that was, but for us, that was a momentum that was happening. He became the pizza, and after that, we will go, and that happened. I never lose the hope that it will happen, and we are here back. So for the people that are left behind, my message is that I know the U.S. government and Ambassador Carlton is working hard to bring them back. And part of the campaign, that maybe we will talk later, part of that is try to make some kind of pressure that happen as soon as possible to bring the people back.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, Jose's mentioned Ambassador Carstens and SPIHA multiple times. If you've not listened to our podcast before, SPIHA is an acronym that stands for Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. And Ambassador Roger Carstens is the special envoy, and he leads a team, an amazing team that works to bring Americans held hostage and wrongfully detained abroad back home. What else, Jose, should the U.S. government be doing better?
Well, one other thing, as I said, is cut that bureaucracy and try to speed up making the classification of wrongfully detained. That's one other thing. The Foley Foundation emitted his annual report, and one of the things that I read there is that they should give more leverage to the SPIHA team. That means that even they do an awesome job, they have some limitation, because according to the law, whatever, they should have a more leverage from the budgeting point of view, from the access to the direct access to the most top officials of the U.S., because one of the things we learn during this process is that sometimes there are some kind of roadblocks in the administration, that if you could have that direct access, you could avoid those roadblocks. I remember the second time that Roger went there. We with the SIG came to be all the life executive of oil. Always were planning and making project planning, that type of stuff. We told him, why don't you do a project planning with milestones? It will be a good way to handle this. Because again, the roadblock sometimes is what makes the decision to be, it take longer and longer and longer, and longer it takes, it becomes more difficult. And the other thing is, put the politics aside. This is something that should be not treated as politics, and this is something that this administration of the U.S. is doing good. They have made the moral courage to take the politics aside, and this is something that had to be very clear. This is nothing related to politics. This is something related to human lives that deserve to be brought back to their families.
You bring up a good point. Access to the decision makers within the U.S. government, yes, and the roadblocks that are in place. This is absolutely right. So and that's not just in the United States, it happens in the UK, in other countries as well. So what the families of hostages and wrongfully detained individuals abroad tend to do is they go straight to the media. Correct. And then that bypasses these roadblocks. So they go to the media and they get attention from a lot more people, including decision makers. So if the government gave them more attention and more access, then the families wouldn't have to go to the media to then complain about this, about not getting access, about saying the government is not prioritizing this. I interviewed Elizabeth Whelan, Paul Whelan's sister. Paul Whelan is an American and former U.S. Marine currently held in Russia, alongside Brittany Griner. And she mentioned that transparency is very important. A lot more transparency is needed from the government to reassure the families that everything is being done to bring their loved ones home. And that's what's lacking. Not the fact that they're not doing everything possible to bring their loved ones home, but that transparency and sharing that information with the families. And that's definitely what needs to be changed. Now, when it comes to journalists and the media, obviously they're very important in kind of reminding people, raising awareness of hostage diplomacy, reminding people that we have these innocent Americans wrongfully detained or held hostage overseas. And many journalists have reported on the Citgo Six. Maybe not all of them, maybe not enough, but there were definitely journalists that were reporting on the Citgo Six. What can journalists do to help?
The media is so important. And one of the things that for me is a kind of a lesson learned, all this process, is to all the families, and this is a message to all the families that have somebody left behind. And in some cases, if they are in the unfortunate situation that are kept recently, don't keep silent. The people have to go to the medias as soon as possible, because one of the things that happens sometimes is that the first approach is don't say nothing, keep silent, keep quiet. We're going to handle behind the door, So that was a situation for us the first year. We kept our families, we kept like 1 year silent, because by that time we were instructed to keep silent. 1 year passed. Nothing happened. Nobody was taking care of us. So one day we meet among our six, because we were always like having kind of a board meeting, the six of us, brainstorming things. And we said, you know what? We have to go to the media. And our family, it was kind of a bizarre thing, because we were thinking and thinking. And when we went to the family, they already thought on that. They always were above us. We thought we were doing things, and they already were doing it. So they were thinking to go to the media. So when they begin to go to the media, almost 1 year after, is that our situation began to be raised up. By the way, the Citgo Six name appeared in that moment when we began to go to the media. The media were very good supporters. They became very good supporters. But one of the things that I suggest to the media, and I have been hearing from other people, is that when they refer to the cases, sometimes they put those titles that doesn't mean absolutely nothing what the case is going through. Sometimes the media said that Citgo Six that were kept by corruption in the government. That was a sham trial. Everybody knew that. So why they are putting that as a title? Maybe because they want to sell the news. So the media should be more clear when they refer to the hostages, because everybody knows that the people that is taking hostages, why they are taken. So don't promote the news in the wrong way. This is a recommendation to the media. Sometimes I believe they do it is because they want to sell. I have seen cases like Britney, when they refer to her. Come on, she's kept because she's American, period. Nothing more. So that is a recommendation. But even said that, I'm glad that there are some media that have been very supportive in our case. And it can be helpful for the future for other families that are going through this process. But that is my recommendation.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And I've said that many times on this podcast. What the media does is, in some cases like Russia, Iran, and even Venezuela, they repeat Venezuelan state media's propaganda. Correct. They repeat the government propaganda. And it's meant to tarnish your reputations, make you look guilty.
Correct.
So when they say 6 oil executives are guilty of corruption or whatever false charge they put you in jail for, you're doing the work of the Venezuelan government for them. You are making this innocent person look guilty, even though they're innocent. Maybe some of them are doing it because of the headlines, to sell newspapers, to get some clicks. I do think some other journalists do it because they feel, well, we don't want to appear biased. We want to just report what the government says. But the problem is, you need to do some investigative journalism.
Correct. You
need to understand. You need to go do some research. Focus on the truth, not balance. And Correct. That's the problem. You can't. It's not just enough to say what the family say and then what this foreign government says. Do your research. Look for the truth. I understand you don't want to appear biased as a journalist, but focus on the truth, because when you just copy and paste the headline that this foreign government, I mean, when you just use this false charge in that headline, when you're referring to this American citizen, this innocent citizen, you're making things a lot worse for them.
Correct.
So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that one. Now, what can the American public do to help? And not just the American public, people around the world, because, with social media, the internet, even if you're not, there were many people campaigning for your release who are not American. I'm not American. Right. So I'm a member of the public, and I can raise awareness. I've been raising awareness of your case. So what can members of the public do to help?
Be more involved, because again, as I said previously, many people are not aware about this situation. I don't know if because they don't get the message or really they don't care, because sometimes the people are kind of, that is not my problem. I don't want to hear about it. I have enough problem right now in my life to have an additional problem. And okay, that is fair. Maybe it's fair to the people, because it's a way they protect themselves. But that is wrong. That is wrong, because you said it several times today. You never know when it's going to happen to you. Because I can tell you, not even in my worst nightmare, I never in my life thought that something like this could happen to me. I was a guy that I had more than 30 years being working in the oil industry without no failure. A successful career all my life. I never had even a transit ticket. So I was a guy that I never thought that something wrong could happen to me. And then it happened this thing. And then my first thing is, why this is happening to me? What is happening to the other guys? That, by the way, the other 5 guys that was with me, the 606, all of us were in the same situation, where 6 guys with long-term working in the oil industry, with a successful career, with good families, a long-term marriage, and having no issue in their life. So all we saw, why we 6 are in this situation. That can happen to anybody. So one of the awareness is that people should be really more conscious about this. And I don't mean that the people have to begin to be advocating but the people should raise their voices. They should go to their constituents. They should begin to make pressure to take more care on this, because if nobody makes pressure on this, the people are left behind. I have been hearing some cases that people are left behind in China, for example, that in Syria, and when I see those cases, to tell you the truth, that shocked my heart when I hear the family of these guys saying that they're left alone. That should not be happening. So again, one of the things that the people had to do better is put more pressure in the government officials to take more care on this situation, because sometimes it's a matter of taking care.
I absolutely agree with you. If it's not on the tip of the constituents' tongues, politicians tend not to pay attention.
Correct.
Again, as you said earlier, there's so many things going on right now. There are wars, there's pandemics, there's inflation, there's elections. So many things going on, and most politicians tend to govern by firefighting.
Correct.
So and unfortunately, what that means is the loudest voices in the room tend to be answered first.
Correct.
So that's what you can do as a member of the public. Keep raising awareness of hostage diplomacy. Keep raising awareness of cases of Americans, Brits, of French nationals, anyone wrongfully detained abroad, held hostage abroad. Now, Jose, in my last episode, I interviewed Ayah Hijazi, As I mentioned, she's an American citizen and a humanitarian who was wrongfully imprisoned in Egypt for 3 years.
Mhm.
She told me that even though you leave prison, prison never leaves you. One of the most important things she recommends returning hostages do is ensure they have access to psychological care. Now, I know you mentioned that when you were in San Antonio, they had this compression period, and you got you had access to people that provided you with psychological care. Do you feel that you need this type of care going forward? And if so, have you been able to get access to it?
Yes. The quick answer is yes, because definitely the people when he's freed need psychological care. Not only him, all his family, because one of the process that maybe the people doesn't realize is that the family goes so much pain in the family. It's so much pain, the suffering, because sometimes I believe that the family suffers much more than the prisoner. Because when you're in the prison, you know that is the situation. You know that you're there. You know what is happening to you, and you kind of begin to know how to manage it and survive it. And you are there, but your family is always behind, suffering. I remember when we were in San Antonio, I heard from one of the kids of our colleagues and my kids that they were saying that they were invited to a party. They decided not to go because they were thinking, what is my dad eating now? They were going to go to a marriage. They decided not to go. They were invited to a dinner. They decided not to go. So their life became sad, became to be imposed because of us. So I can tell you, in my case, in my particular case, my kids now, I have so much relief. So, it's kind of a new start for them. So, of course, you need some psychological help. If you think even that you feel that you are okay, you need it because you need to restart your life. You put your clock in 0 and you're beginning back. So it will happen to you. It will happen to your family. So my strongly recommendation is, of course, they have to take care of you. And as I said, Hostage USA and all the organization that are receiving in San Antonio has been taking of us so much, and I will continue doing it. I will continue doing it because I truly believe that it will help us. Yes.
Jose, what recommendations would you give the families with loved ones still held hostage around the world? I know you mentioned psychological care. I know you mentioned don't give up hope. What other recommendations would you give them?
Well, one of the things that I strongly recommend to the families is that stick together. Because one of the things that we learned is that when our families, when our kids decided to campaign together, that made kind of a boost in this situation. Not all, but almost all, most of the family got together and created the Bring Our Family Home campaign. They did an awesome job. There are wonderful people working behind them. Even some of them have been helping them from the communication and strategy, these type of things, have been working pro bono there. And when we realized that we were having families that had people kept in Iran, in China, in Russia, in Afghanistan, Venezuela, and other countries, Myanmar, whatever. So and it became like a kind of the family that you really don't want to be part, but at the end you become part of that family, and working together makes things more strong. So when they decided to unveil the mural in Georgetown, that was something amazing. making that happen. When they did the projection of the image in the building in New York during the UN General Assembly, that was amazing. When they did last week the Welcome Home event in Georgetown, that was amazing. So they have been doing amazing things. And you know why? Because even that individually, there have been some individual interviews of the family in medias or even being received by the presidency. Every time everybody is talking collectively. They talk about their case, but they're talking collectively. They're talking among the rest of them. So my recommendation is that continue doing it. And not only continue doing it, bring more people to the campaign. Because there are some people that decided to keep quiet, decided to, for some reason, decided not to be part of the campaign. But I recommend the people to do it. And even the person that are released, of course, they're going to go to their normal life. Maybe they're not going to be 100% available. But give some part-time to the campaign. Like you're doing some kind of social thing. So the point is that they stick together, and of course, never lose the hope, never lose the faith, because sometimes I understand that people can get down. The people that have now the family left always is why they didn't come, when they're going to come, or in other countries they say, okay, now it happened. I'm glad that I have been receiving messages from the people saying, hey, I'm glad that you're back. When is going to happen to my family? And it's a very compelling question, because you have to put in the foot of that person. They have their family that are waiting for to receive them. For example, I'm going to say it here. I remember during the event, during the weekend, that was the awesome event, the Welcome Home event in Georgetown. In the afternoon happened the fire in the prison in Iran, and something that was beautiful in few hours became a nightmare, because you didn't know what your family was going through. So this is kind of roller coaster. And the only way that you can go through it is sticking together, helping among each other. And of course, never losing the hope that they're going to be brought back soon. Always thinking in that they will appear in the moment they don't know, like it happened to us. So we're a proof. We're here. That you can come back.
That's great advice. Jose, we're almost at the end of our interview. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
Well, for me, first of all, it's a pleasure that you gave me this opportunity, because it's the opportunity to try to give my message to the people that have family that they're still there. Try to raise the awareness to the people that doesn't have family, but you will never know when this can happen to you or can happen to somebody near to you. And I know that there are a lot of things going on, but the people should be more aware about this situation. And I want to give that clear message for the family that were left in Venezuela and the families there in worldwide, that they should stick together, continue campaigning and working hard to bring their family home. I think that this has marked a path. Every time that the people are brought back, it's kind of a learning process how to handle these type of things. And it marked a path, because when we were brought, we were 7 from Venezuela, 1 from Afghanistan, and 1 from Iran. We're 9 guys that came back. It was a block of people that came back. And so I think this is there's more awareness. I believe that, the team of State SPIHA is doing so awesome, that they are doing an amazing job behind the scenes, and we're going to continue looking people coming very soon. So I'm really thinking on that. I'm thinking on them, and I'm thinking that I will continue advocating to help them as much as I can in my possibilities. So thank you very much for having me here.
You're very welcome, Jose. And I can't say this enough. I'm so happy that you're free and back home with your family. I'm grateful for the US government and everyone else that helped bring you home. I'm grateful that you're continuing to campaign for other hostages around the world. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Pod Hostage Diplomacy. Thank you for giving your time and for showing these families that they're not alone, that there are good, caring people out there willing to stand by their side and help in any way possible.
Because if enough people care, then the right people will care enough. This is a basic rule of thumb that is true for all campaigning.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to our fortnightly newsletter called The Hostage Briefing. It's the best way to keep up to date with the cases we're working on, as well as new episodes. You can subscribe to this newsletter using the link in the description of this podcast episode that you're currently listening to. Thanks again, and take care.